we want to make sure. They're sitting next to each other. but continue to make them feel welcome. Like, if there's something you don't know, feel free to reach out there. Nobody's
Both
here
of you going to be presenting?
Yes.
Like,
Okay,
there's
go
no
first.
trolls here.
Let me clip your mic on.
They're not,
Make it easy for you.
they're not going to actually make it though. Everybody's very
Appreciate it.
very kind. So keep that in mind.
Let me get you right here.
Perfect. And yeah, let's give a round of applause for keeping this thing alive in the community.
Logistical, cool. Again, Tommy and Trip, they're our coordinators. They keep us alive in the Slack channel. We're like, hey guys, we need the decision. So the Subash usually chimes in with something crazy, and then Steve comes in with something logical, and I'm like, okay. Anyways, real quick, again, it's about community. So please, if you think about people who want to present or you want to network with somebody, Steve's here because they're doing a draw and run for a conference or a speaking engagement doing later. That's great. The folks from Estes did the same thing, I think 1 or 2 months ago, and that was great too before their conference. It's a great place to do a dry run. Great place to get your feet wet or figure out how to speak. I talked about it the first one. Just, hey, I'm not a comfortable person talking in front of people, but for some reason it works out well for me once I get over the friendly piece of that. So, again, community. My plug is the RVA Tech Data and I Summit. I'm coach here on there with Eric. That's on March 19th, 18th. I should know that date. Someone's going to shoot me for that. I bet you. That's okay. Our call for papers.
We have the other 12 dates posted.
Yeah, so this is going to do a pre-game before that, I think.
Yep, pre-game.
For that. But we're looking for call for papers. So it's everything from data and AI that's on. It's a great thing. It's at the Children's Museum, or it's a Dewey Gutwell part of the Children's Museum. We're looking for call for papers. So RVA Tech on events, Dave and I Summit. Love people to submit papers, talk about anything you want. 30 minutes, Q&A, slides, cool stuff. We had about 425 people last year. We probably expect 500, 600 people more than that this year. We have a really good keynote speaker, Sharon Dye, TEDx. If you go up there, find her. She has some great talks about data and AI. She's awesome. We're very close to have her. So thank you all for coming. Stevie, Matt, do you have anything else?
Yeah, real quick, I'll just say following two individuals who are very charismatic and good at speaking means everything I plan to say has been said, but I will just add briefly, we did it for a year. That's pretty awesome. I think we only have 1 or 2 months off. We set out to do an event every single month. Here we are in December, a month that I would have guessed would have like 6 people, so thank you all for being here. That's awesome. We plan to do the same for next year. We will post on LinkedIn all of the dates ahead of time. It might be subject to change, but we're going to try to get that nailed down. We've got January, February, and March nailed down. Like Todd said, March is going to be a little bit of a pregame for the Data Summit. Lastly, I just want to thank you all for being here. This is, kind of the dream of our EPON office. We built this central space to do this kind of thing, and we're hosting this, and the Cloud Wranglers, and RJug, and the Python Meetup. I forget what it's called. So we just love it. We're so thankful you guys are here. We're happy to have you. And without further ado,
introduce Steve Nerheim from Maine Digital.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. I got to go up front to talk. All right. A lot of coverage on topics I was going to sort of broach onto. Thank you, EPON, for hosting us. Thank you, RVA Data Engineering, for putting this series on. Eric, thanks for giving us some inspiration. I attended my first one of these 2.5, 3 months ago, and Eric and Bob from Estes were over here talking about Denodo. Really insightful topic. I thought you guys did a great job of kind of keeping it high level and then getting into the details so that we could meet the needs of the audience. And as I sat in there, I was like, I haven't gotten up and talked in front of a large number of people in a long time, so I'm going to give it a shot. So thank you guys for giving us a chance to present. And thanks, Andrew and the Salonis team, for coming up from out of town to help present this, because I'm really good at the high-level stuff, not so good at the details. So on the next slide, quick introductions. My name's Steve. I'm with Maine Digital. We're a woman-owned small business headquartered out of the McLean, Virginia area, focused on consulting. I like to simplify it and just talk about all the cool projects at the intersection of people, process, and technology. I've been active in the Richmond market, the data scene, the technology scene for over 25 years, mostly as a consultant, but I've had some internal stints working at SunTrust, at Capital One, and I've had a number of the companies here represented as clients in the past. In my past, I used to be a developer. I was a process engineer. I was a data architect, a business architect at one point. And then I got off the technology train and it sped off without me. So when I got back into consulting, business development was the only option for me. and I've been doing that for about a decade now. So I'm about a mile wide and an inch deep, which is why I brought Andrew along for the details.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Nice to meet you. And again, thanks iPod and everybody else for having us here today. My name is Andrew Trease. I'm a value engineer here at Celonis. In honor of the holidays, people who like, what is a value engineer? So what we're here to do is, meet with clients, make sure they understand the technology, right? We want to be able to be a technical liaison in that front. And then as deals move forward, we're here also to provide value and make sure that they're optimizing the software in the most capable way possible. So a little bit about me, was previously experienced in residential lending and mortgages, and then started here at Celonis specializing in our financial services sector. So I'm very excited to speak with you guys today, and again, appreciate the opportunity.
Cool. Next slide. All right. Agenda-wise, hit the introductions, maybe spend 5 to 10 minutes on sort of what is process mining at the highest level, sort of an industry view perspective, a little bit on the competitive landscape, because there are a number of players in this space, and then I'll hand it over to Andrew for a deeper dive on Celonis itself and how they approach this, this technology. So, for those of you guys with good taste in movies, you'll recognize this. If you're not, this is from Office Space. In that movie, our hero, Bill Lumbergh, brings in the Bobs, Bob Porter and Bob Slidell. I forget the name of the company. It might be Intertrode or Intertech. Was it? Intertech. We want to make it more efficient, right? And that movie hit home with me because at that point in my career, I was a young consultant focused on process engineering, and we would get brought into organizations or departments within an organization and be asked to go find process improvement opportunities. Ironically, when I was doing this at SunTrust, our senior leader had never seen the movie, and my colleague was also named Steve. So he would say, we're going to send the Steves in. And no matter how many times we told him to stop doing that, it was, we're going to send in the Steves and we're going to send in the Steves. So on the next slide, when we would go in on those projects, we'd go into a call center, and advance it one more time here, and we'd literally have a stopwatch, a clipboard. I'd sit next to somebody in the contact center, and I'd document their business process. And we were pretty good at it, right? We'd catch somebody on a day, and we'd get a pretty accurate depiction of how the process ran that day for that person or how it was supposed to run. When we were really on our game, we'd find a couple of variations in the process or process improvement opportunities that spoke to, how was the process designed, how does it really run, but we would never, ever get to the reality of it, right? And this slide always gets a reaction. Sometimes it's a laugh, sometimes it's an ooh or an ah, but this is a legit business process that was supposed to be this, right? The variations pop up if it's me doing the process versus Andrew. If it's CarMax, I just purchased a vehicle there the other day. Maybe it goes left if you're, I had a great experience. I had this experience, but I did have to have the vehicle shipped from Fredericksburg, so I got a slightly different version of the experience. But when you think about all the little variations, things started over, forms not working, different vendors having different possibilities, it wasn't until recently that you could leverage technology to do this. And so in the old school way, Steve or the Bobs, clipboard, good interview questions, observation, documentation, advanced to a place where we're using technology to pull this out. And so when I sat in here 2 months ago, Eric, and saw you guys present on Denodo, which, at its simplest level, think of it as a giant data overlay that connects a lot of different varying data points, I saw some synergies to what happens here. So what is process mining? Simply put, it's an ability to take data and turn it into intelligence. So in that old school scenario where I had my clipboard and the stopwatch and I recorded the step and the next step and what they're supposed to do and I looked at old school documentation, process mining rather goes and looks at data to drive this. And so if you've got either a short running process or a long running process, as long as a couple of key elements exist within a data log, a unique identifier, so in the example of me purchasing that vehicle 2 days ago, it's got a VIN number or some ID number that CarMax tracks in its database. It's got status changes that go on. It's in inventory, it's on hold, it's on the lot, it's been purchased. It's going through these status changes. And every time it has a status change, there's a timestamp associated with that. So you combine those three things by taking data from a data log on either one or multiple systems, and you start to build the story of what does this forest look like for all of the individual trees in that forest. And you can look at it over a longer time window so that you can see 1, 2, 3 years worth of data and how all these business processes are changing. So that's at a high level what process mining is. The next slide speaks to a similar concept called task mining. I don't know if anyone's encountered this yet, but slightly different approach with the same end goal in mind, where instead of looking at data logs, you install software directly on users' computers, tracks things like mouse clicks, keystrokes, idle time, applications interacted with to get an accurate picture of what an individual is working with on a daily basis, geared towards identifying process improvement opportunities. And put the two together, you've got process mining at the data level, you've got task mining at the individual user or the computer level, and on the next slide, brings that all together to process intelligence, right? Two complementary technologies with the same goal in mind. How do I take data, turn it into an actionable story so that we can identify business process improvement opportunities? And those opportunities can range from everything from training opportunities, simplification of a form, improved data entry, some level of robotic automation to speed up a slow step in the business process. All are things that can be identified by this technology. There are a number of players in the space. Andrew, on the next slide. I think this is, I always get them confused. This is Gartner. Just kind of took a snapshot from their January release of who are the leaders in the space. I think Celonis was amongst the first, and they've established the vision and a great lead in that space, but there are a number of competing products out there. And I think it's really an exciting place to be in. And I thought this audience might be interested in it because it's a great example of how do we take data and unlock an extra layer of potential from it by creating visualizations that speak directly to business process improvement opportunities. And I don't know if you covered in the demo too, but the other cool thing about it, and I referenced this a couple minutes ago when I can look at a business process over a longer time frame. If you use this or another tool and you identify a business process improvement opportunity, it gives you a great visualization opportunity that says, this is what it looked like before, this is what it looks like after, this is an estimated return on investment for that improvement. And that improvement could have been as simple as we improved a form or we got rid of variations in a form so that all our vendors were on the same document in that space. So the two things that are best about these demos, it's not me talking, it's that spaghetti diagram that everyone sort of either laughs at or oohs and ahs at, or the actual demo itself. So I'll get out of the way and let Andrew take us through a demo of how Celonis approaches this. So.
Appreciate it, Steve. Yeah, so what is Celonis, right? So thanks, Steve. You put up that magic quadrant of, Celonis in that top right. Well, what differentiates us in that field, right? So we obviously have that process mining engine. So something that we strive to do is have a 360-degree approach to data, right? We want to ingest as much data as possible to give you an output so you know what's going on within your processes. The next step is that process intelligence, right? We want to be able to build analyses and have insights that are quick to action, and so that you're able to not only be able to understand what's going on within your processes, but also be able to then on that next step is have that action and execution to be able to not fix those problems that you find within your process. So just a couple of different things that Celonis has been able to go through, and just to kind of quickly get into the platform. As Steve showed us, this is kind of where our bread and butter is, right? This process explorer. This is our most common process map, starting in terms of what I'm showing you today is a procurement demo, starting from our purchase order requisition item all the way down through clearing an invoice. So one thing that I want to start here is that this is a complete and objective view because it's 100% data driven. We're not having Steve go with a stopwatch and going on someone's shoulder, making sure that they complete their PO in 35 seconds, right? This is through the data structure, through typically an SAP, an Oracle, somewhere else, and we're able to aggregate that data to show the view that we have here. So another thing that I like to look at this through is that we went through that slide before. We saw that it has that data, it has the process intelligence, it has the action. And an even simpler way I like to look at it as a find, frame, and fix approach. We want to find where our problems are within this Process Explorer. We want to frame them in a way that we understand, and then not only fix the problem, but really set up guardrails so that we allow or don't allow those problems from happening again. And this is, I think, the best place to start, because this Process Explorer is the backbone for everything else that we're going to see today. And as I said, this is our most common process, but quickly, what we're able to do through Celonis is identify different variations within the process. So we are looking at things like free text requisition items. We're looking
Andrew, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
so
go
in
for it.
this, no one drew that data diagram. That was the snapshot of the data. And at the zoom, I'll call it a zoom level that you were at, you were showing the most frequent path.
Yes,
and
exactly.
so as you pull in these variations, you're basically saying, show me the next most frequent set of steps?
Set of
Okay.
activities, right? So when we expanded that, our free text requisitions were the most common activity that was outside of that most common process path, followed by the partial delivery, and then thirdly, the change in price. So the further we expand, the further we're going to grow towards that spaghetti diagram, but that's kind of how we're able to start that process of being able to start identifying different problems in the process that we either may know or some that come as a surprise. So the next step in terms of what Celonis can do is identify, all right, so we've identified maybe something that we didn't expect. Hey, we see that there's 150,000 change in price within our system. We didn't know it was that high. So we can quickly jump in and see, all right, there's 150,000 and they cover 13% of all of our cases that are flowing through that process. So we can specifically either filter on that, but also what we can do is, since we have those timestamps that Steve talked about earlier, what we're able to do is when we have those timestamps, what's the effect on our total throughput time? Which in this case, whenever a change in price takes place, it adds an additional 10 days to our entire process. So not only do these changes in price add an additional 10 days, what we're also able to see is if we keep on scrolling down, we end up getting to the exact same point of that clearing of invoice that we were at before with that change in price. So this can affect different working capital, this can affect different rework activities, so on and so forth. So before moving forward, I kind of want to show you Celonis's process discovery capabilities. So we can quickly go from just a couple of variations as we see on the screen here, and then really be able to ramp it up and be able to see that spaghetti diagram that we saw earlier, and to kind of show how Celonis is able to quickly identify and ramp up how complex a procurement process can be when you combine people, processes, and technology. And I think this is a really crucial view to see, is because what we're able to identify is that Celonis is able to take in all of your data and 100% objectively view and display what's actually happening in those back system processes. And on top of that, since we have all that data, we're able to filter through and identify different root causes, inefficiencies, or maybe any other root causes that we're able to find immediately, that we can find low-hanging fruits to provide value as quick as possible. So through 1.2 million purchase orders across 1,200 different variants, what's the next step, right? How do we be able to action on this type of insights? Well, oftentimes what we have customers do is we provide an executive dashboard in which someone can take a health check of what's going on within the business. So in this case, we're looking at labor productivity, working capital, and spend control. Now, this is just a demo. These types of views are completely configurable to whatever, if we're working in financial services, manufacturing, retail. But the point is, what we're able to do is kind of be able to take that process data and be able to have more in-depth analysis when we are looking at what's going on within the business. Now, taking a look at the screen, what we can find is that labor productivity has a negative trend in terms of our touches per PO within labor productivity. We want to have, on average, a target line of 1.8 touches, and over the last few months, we have jumped up to 2.3. So now that we've identified an area of what we can have in a little bit of improvement, we can be able to hand it off to maybe an analyst to take a deeper dive into what's going on. So Solonis is able to instantly identify top inefficiencies. In this case, we're looking at rework activities, and in this case, when each rework activity happens, it's impacting our touches per PO by 162%. So if we click in on that rework activity, we can find a bunch of different variables of what's maybe going on within that process. And if we take a look, we find that change in price that we identified earlier on that Process Explorer. So out of the 348,000 rework activities that are happening, 146,000 of what we saw earlier are taking place in that. So we can then filter and look at what the effect of these changes in price are doing within the business. So we can drill down by material, organization, or vendor and see the total dollar impact that they have by having to go through that change in price. So we've been able to look at a high level, what are the most common variants in our process. We're then able to identify on a high level what's going on within the business on a metric level, and then dive deep into what is causing those problems within the business. Now, just because we now have an idea of what the problem is, doesn't mean that it's fixed. And this is where Solonis takes the next step in being able to try to provide actionable items in which we're able to, again, fix those problems and prevent these things from happening again. So on the back end, since we have all that data aggregated, we're able to look through and to detect those frequent price changes, right? So we saw them on the Process Explorer, and the system's automatically looking for, hey, when do these price changes happen? The next step is, hey, are they consistent? Are we changing our price from flat screen TVs to $100, $150 every single time? Is this happening over and over and over again? If it is, we automatically update that price in the ERP system and then inform that master data team that change has taken place. Now, obviously, we know that's not always the case. Oftentimes, there's a lot of complexities that happens within that. And in that case, we want to bring a human in the loop, and we automatically notify that procurement specialist that something fishy is going on. And something I didn't touch on earlier is that we're able to provide different assets, like maybe a operational dashboard, in which someone can look on within Solonis and identify a particular PO and go in and provide, link it with these action flows and click a button of, yes, this is a change in price that we want to change, or no, we want to keep it. And when we click that button that it does need a change, we automatically link it up to, in this case, a ServiceNow tool, but we can connect up to 1,300 different nodes that we can connect to make this process as easy as possible. So going back to that fine frame approach, right? We wanted to identify what was the problem, figure out and frame them in a way we understand, and then provide guardrails to not only fix the problem, but then also prevent them from happening again. So with that, if you have any questions before moving forward. Yeah?
I was curious, how do you define consistency? Is that configurable,
Yeah.
modifiable? I'm assuming the thresholds or the particular modeling?
Yeah.
Methods or what?
So consistent is, whatever you define as consistent, right? So if it needs to be, 100, if it's 10,000 of these POs are being changed in the same month or so, then that's what it is. But these action flows are completely kind of a sandbox environment, so it's whatever you define that consistent as to be. Yeah.
So you go in, you identify the key logs, you go in and start harvesting the logs. Within the logs, you identify the dominant transactions. The dominant transactions become the dominant steps in your key workflow, and then as you're dressing out that workflow, you're taking into account more and more of the various transactions to represent broader and broader parts of the flow.
I'll play that back, minus the dominant part, because you kind of ingest the entire data log. So you might start with SAP, you might start with Oracle, you might start with another system. The more systems that you bring into it, the higher fidelity your picture becomes. And what I think you're referencing, though, is the sort of dominant path, the darker lines or the zoomed out view. They're all in there. So when I'm wearing my consulting process manager or process engineer hat, I'm looking for the costly dark lines that lead to delays or to cost variations. And I like it as a diagnostic tool. It resides as a data, it's not data fabric, but a data layer over existing systems. And also provides me as a manager of an operation. Maybe I'm an inventory at CarMax, maybe I'm in accounts receivable at Estes, I can run my business to some degree on that as well. Another use case that doesn't quite get shown in here, I'm at Capital One and I've got service level agreements on wires. I can be monitoring how am I doing, where do I have risk, do I need to flex my resources and put Carl into another department at the end of the day to get all the work done. So I've kind of gone a little bit off script on what you asked for there, but it takes it all in. It leverages data in an unbiased way to demonstrate where are the paths, the steps. There's some level of analytical support that goes into that says, oh, when we say the status is in inventory, this is what we mean. When something takes 10 days, here's the cost associated with it. And you can just add fidelity to and detail to the story. So, but I love it as both an ability to analyze the engine, identify opportunities to improve the engine, to quantify the effectiveness of the improvements that you made, and also just to run the engine. So,
Yeah.
Is it able to go through Outlook emails? A lot of those, let's say, a lot of those processes, triggers, R9 SAP, it's not in any other Oracle database,
Yeah.
SharePoint, it's email.
You know, and that's a problem we run into quite frequently. I'd say that is something that we can do technically, but it's not. It doesn't set us up for success in terms of when we're looking at what a successful client can be. The more that is in that centralized data pool is kind of where we like to, that's where our most successful customers are.
yeah, I'll liken it to like any process, right? You don't run everything in Workday, you don't run everything in Oracle. You might start off a project like this and just point it at Oracle, and so you've only got the Oracle data, and everything else kind of goes into that, a black box or an old English map. There's dragons over here. You don't know what's quite going in there until you can bring it back. But as you mature your implementation and bring in more systems, more information, and start tying things together, the fidelity increases, the gray areas become less gray, and you start to fill them out. I wouldn't, if you have a long-running process that leverages Outlook or email or some sort of non-system log component, I wouldn't say steer away from this. You just have to understand there will be parts of radio silence in a business process until we can pull it back in and figure out where it was. And that's usually a good place to go look for a process improvement as well. So,
Yep.
So can you bake in process mining? Can you bake in Salonis from the start, from the design? So let's say you have a Pega systems and you're defining a workflow, you're defining a process. Can you put your hooks in, if you will, to here's what we're looking for, this piece of data in the design as opposed to after the fact, looking at logs and so forth?
Yeah.
your recent Symbio acquisition?
Yep. That's where I was going to go. Yeah. So we actually recently acquired Symbio, which is a BPM tool, this past month, and I think that's part of the guidance of where the company is trying to go. Is we have that in depth after the fact, right, of being able to identify what's going on in the process, and with the acquisition of Symbio, being able to be on the forefront of that and be able to say, all right, let's combine both the mapping side and use the data and the analytics of what should be our most ideal path with the process mining side of what's actually happening, to then kind of marry those two to kind of create the full circle.
And we're using it now. Like I don't carry the clipboard anymore. We go into a project. Everything you've demonstrated here, Andrew, focusing on live data, right, hitting an active data or a system log of some sort. There's functionality in there. I can take a flat file. I can take a flat file of highly redacted data, and you just use it as a starting point. I don't go straight to Visio. I loved Visio. I made a career out of it. I'm not using it anymore.
You admit that?
Yeah, I was good at it. I could get my flows were tight. But now I don't have to do it, right? I point at it and I get a clearer picture of it, right? So.
Yeah.
How complex is this measurement of cost?
account for variance and the cost associated with time? And are those business rules defined by the business? Or do they get pretty complicated?
So when you say cost, you mean like the cost of implementation or how?
How expensive it might be to take one route over another?
Yeah. I'd say, so we kind of have part of my role is to come into the room and when you come to me with a problem, it's to say, hey, here's where the software is great at being able to be implemented and be successful. And kind of go to terms of the Outlook example, being able to identify areas to where we might not, it would be a higher cost of effort, a higher cost of variables on that front. And so it's kind of, in terms of Celonis specifically, we kind of call it our core four. So in terms of procurement, order management, accounts payable, accounts receivable, that's kind of where we have our lowest barrier to entry and then kind of highest value on the out end of that.
And it's going to vary by business process.
Yeah.
So when he talks about the core four, accounts payable, right? There's a financial cost associated with paying a bill too fast or too slow, right? So you talk to, the data log doesn't know that, but you talk to accounting and you fill that in and suddenly, oh shit, this process that took an extra 5 days cost us 2% or 20 basis, whatever it is from a cost perspective. Another example where we recently used this on a project, we had a client in the financial services space. Their problem statement was that the time it took them to open a rec to hire a software developer and to put a butt in the seat was like 100 days. And they didn't know why. And the reason they didn't know why is because this business process here, each recruiter had their own special version of this. I couldn't put a dollar amount on it, but what I could tell you is that a good software engineer wasn't waiting 100 days for that job. So their cost was not filling seats, and it just got worse and worse and worse in that capacity. So there's a component of this that says, how long does it take? What widget am I looking at? What statuses did it go through? How long did it take to get there? And then there's an analytical overlay to it that says, oh, when this happens, and it varies greatly. The CarMax example of car sitting in inventory, you guys I like my car. They put a cost associated with it, an invoice that didn't get paid, or an invoice that got paid late, or in financial services, a service level agreement that got blown when the regulator says that you have to respond to Consumer Protection Acts within X days and you blew it, I can put a price tag on that. So those elements kind of come in after the fact. So this, and again, this is why I wanted this audience for this. It's how do I take data, how do I make it visual and impactful so that I can communicate more directly to my business operations and help them understand in partnership with process engineers and folks like Jason back there focus on improving business processes. Where do we focus our energies? Because we don't want to solve every one of those problems. We want to solve the most expensive, most impactful problem first. So.
Is this also taken into account like outages, things like that? Like how do you prevent like your process, you may run into inherently something that a customer could be wrong or something, which leads to some outage. Would that pick this type of scenario up?
Yeah. So we actually are working with a customer right now who had outages in a crucial reporting tool, right? And so they came to us with the problem and said, hey, like we recognize that we are having some outages here and there, but what the problem was is that it was basically sitting in a queue for 30 days and they were only getting the result when it failed, right? And so we were saying, hey, we want to pick up this point to when it gets kind of into that pool to not at 30 days when it eventually fails, but when it's at 15 days, when it's at a warning sign. And so what we were able to do is two things. We were able to not only identify where those outages were and quickly identify where that was, but also to provide alerting tools and monitoring so that when there was a certain threshold that they were comfortable or weren't comfortable at that point of the data being in, we were able to send an instant notification to whoever within internally to say, hey, this is a problem. Let's go take a look and figure out what's going on in the back end.
Yeah, and as wearing my process engineer hat, I look at this visual here as kind of a snapshot. If I get the right slider bar on that, I can look at it over time. I might scroll back to September and be like, oh yeah, we had a hiccup. And maybe that hiccup pointed me in some directions I didn't want to go, so I can kind of recognize it, exclude it, and say where were their process inefficiencies before the hiccup and after the hiccup, so that I don't have
Kind of keep you from like, focusing on what, like
red herrings
using
and
data,
100%. So cool.
Does the tool run on the cloud or can it be run on the laptop on-prem?
It's in the cloud. Yep.
Is this a one-time hit? So you've gone through the analytics, you've identified opportunities, you improved it.
Mhm.
What happens after that? Is there a historical thing where it goes back? Would you have to go back in, reanalyze it as a requirement from the customer, or you just okay, you guys are done?
No, that's one thing that we always want to say is that we always want to have continuous improvement, right? So we don't want this just to be a one-stop shop in terms of we fix a problem, we're done, right? We want to be able to, monitor so that those things don't happen again, but also expand to other areas and kind of be able to build that kind of Celonis vision of, being able to make kind of everything in an optimal efficiency, right? So that's kind of our goal. If we want to be able to not just have this be the one stop, but have it to grow further.
And typically what you'll see in implementations like this is the hard part's finding a place to start, right? It's a cool tool. Every process engineer wants something like this in their back pocket. Unfortunately, it's not free, so you got to find a place to start. Typically, you got to start in accounts payable, accounts receivable, because it's the easiest to map cost savings and dollar value to. And so that first project pays for itself. And now your process engineering team's got a cool tool in their back pocket that can start moving down the value chain on other business process improvement opportunities in there. So.
I don't know if this is the same question or different, but is this an analysis tool or is this real-time monitoring?
Yes.
We can set up dashboards and say, alert, we've hit our variance and so forth.
That real-time monitoring is key, right? It's being able to monitor in that real time and then act as soon as possible as well.
Is this software taking actions, like in addition to monitoring? Is it actually, so you have all these data connections for ingesting logs. Is there any backwards push back to any?
So when go back to I don't know if it was the slide or the dashboard view you had that had, you can put automations on top of it, right? Its core functionality that we talked about was data visualization, identifying action. In this example, again, it doesn't become your system of record. It's sitting on top of other systems of record, but you can set up trigger points. That might be tell the managers that we're understaffed, or we got a bunch of widgets that are going to hit an SLA. We need to do something about it. And then if you automate them in the right way, it then has the ability to go influence the underlying data because it triggered an update of some sort or an action by an individual. So.
Another big thing that me personally in financial service run into a lot is RPA bots. So even though it's still automation, a lot of the time we use this tool right here to act as an intelligent trigger for those RPA bots to fire at the most optimal time. Because we don't want to automate a bad process, so it's kind of acting as that intelligence tool to make sure that RPA bot is firing at the correct time.
I want to ask a little bit about how you feed this with data. It's error logs and timestamps, but is there any kind of extrapolation, or what are the barriers to get all of that to be the same? Steve just said you start with certain systems that are known to have great data, and then of course the customer or the client says, now we're going to try this other thing. Oh, and it's in a different time zone sometimes. Or if it's, because you're really looking at those times.
Yeah.
So at what point are you making up and forcing the data in, which is something that I do in my job, to make it work, versus accepting or fact-checking the fact that this might be 3 or 4 different flavors going into the map?
Yeah, and so like I said, kind of as a company, our realm is kind of that, core structured SAP type. But me working in financial services, that's always not the case, right? So there is a little bit of massaging in terms of, having flat files come in and having to, make sure there are different stuff that our ETL, which is great, but also, massage it in a way that it's fed in. And it's usually not all too bad, but it's usually not just a plug and play of, just here's 5 different tables and we're just going to upload it and it works, right?
And the nice thing about that massaging, so I'll go back to that example, HR system, pulling data out of Workday. that client must have had 5 different ways of saying the same thing from a status perspective. So their underlying Workday application implementation wasn't great. They just had shit data is always going to lead to shit results, right? Now that's not going to change, but this gives you an additional opportunity to sort of massage, weave, and explain without negatively impacting the analysis or your ability to move forward. So you don't have to say, we can't do this because our data in Workday is a mess. It would be better if it was great, but you can work around those types of things and move forward. So
You said ETL tool, is that something that you train clients on how to use, or is that something that the Solonis consultants own, proprietary, and you deliver that?
Say typically it's the Solonis consultants, but we have a lot of our more mature customers have center of excellences that kind of are able to be updated and trained on that type of stuff as well. Yes, sir.
Like from the from the second point, do you guys have like some sort of like API, like in various languages you can integrate this, or is it just like a straight API to do integrations, or like how do you do that for customization? So like company A has a stack of developers that want to integrate or do something cool with your system. How do they interact with it?
I'm not entirely sure on that.
I think part of it's the pre-built connectors, right?
Yeah,
you guys have a growing ecosystem of pre-built connectors, and then some pretty standard language around. If you're not on the list of the Oracles, all these other things, it's a fairly standard. Yeah. It's not as easy, but it's super doable.
I'm curious, like when you mentioned the tools, do you have a tool that's able to get Outlook or connect to an Outlook email server and then transform that into the data needed for this?
In terms of like bringing data from an Outlook perspective,
I think your challenge becomes the business process and whether or not you can have a unique identifier traveling along with it. Like if you had a consistent Outlook process that did a fantastic job of always putting a 12-character ID in the subject line, that would give you some ability to track. But if you've got a willy-nilly process where Joe's mom and pop shop over here sends their invoices in flavor A and somebody else sends them in flavor B, you're going to be in a gray box, right? So.
It looks like I'm curious, the Solonis one on the right there, is that a checkpoint for an employee to come into Solonis and indicate something, mark something, add information manually?
Can you repeat that one more time?
It says take a decision in Solonis. Is that's a manual human operator coming to Solonis and entering information somehow, like a form or something?
Yep. So in this particular example, if we look at price changes, it's the procurement specialist, that human in the loop coming into the Solonis platform, taking a look at an individual PO, and then taking a deeper dive into that specific PO, looking at its history, looking at different variables. And then when we say taking a decision, it's usually clicking some sort of button. And in this case, it would be either update all the change in price for this material, or there's something else going on here. We need to kind of figure something else out.
So in this demo, the likely backstory on this demo is client implemented Solonis, client identified a process inefficiency that the underlying systems didn't support. Client decided to not only diagnose their engine, but run the engine on it. So they adopted a business process that pulls Solonis into the activity and created the step in that spot. So.
Just a quick question here. So a lot of the output that you guys have shown is kind of in sort of that dashboard, business intelligence output. If you have a company or a client who already has an established business intelligence platform, say a Power BI or a Tableau, how does this kind of interact with those? And what kind of is the right audience for Solonis? So if you have, say for example, AR reports that are set up in Tableau, and folks are using that, do they have to kind of go back to Solonis to get to the root cause, or how does that ecosystem work with the end business intelligence tools?
Totally got you. Yeah, so we actually have BI connectors in which we can take kind of the findings that we have in that process intelligence and be able to put them into a BI dashboard. Now, the difference between BI and Solonis is this node right here, that taking decision within Solonis, right? So we have some customers that are like, oh, this is great. We actually just want to use that kind of BI simple or like BI like dashboard in Salonis because they have that extra tool of that taking of action. But for those established Tableau BI shops, we actually have connectors that are able to within that BI platform, so you're not ping-ponging between both, that are able to kind of have it in that embedded view.
Yeah.
Big thanks to Steve and Alan. A lot of questions, so we appreciate you guys.
That's what was vibrating back here. So.
I think everybody wanted to make a gym. So I thank you all for showing up and letting these guys present. We'll hang out here a little bit. But again, really for presenters, the date's out in January-ish, right? Yes, you'll hold us to it. Look forward to everyone coming to the Data and AI Summit in March. It'll be awesome. Full day of cool data and stuff. If you're looking for people with content, or you think people that have something they want to present, or somebody's kind of shy, like Steve was very shy. You just come out and just present. You just try. It could be 15 minutes. You don't need to have 45 minutes or 30 minutes of Q&A. That's fantastic. So join our group. Group on LinkedIn. RVA Data Engineering. Join that. Tom will let you in. We have a Slack channel. You can join too as well. Ask questions. Just continue to build a community as Subox said. I appreciate it when you come tonight. Just kind of make sure you clean up, pick up, help. Also, big shout out to Epon and Steve for hosting places. Space has been hard to find, but I think now it's getting easier to find.
It's a good space.
Which is awesome. But again, thanks. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, sir.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.